Hey, everybody, and welcome to Learning from Smart People. I am your host, Rob Oliver, and I am absolutely sure that you are going to learn something today because I have another smart person with me. Her name is Michelle Thompson. After suffering a stroke at the age of 36, Michelle has turned her trial into a way to serve people. She now teaches others the power of outsourcing and delegation. Michelle, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Rob. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So, part of the reason I wanted to have you here is because of your backstory. Um, as a person with a disability, I am all about people who have gone through difficult experiences in their life and say, "Listen, this was a learning experience for me. It has changed the way that I engage the world, but it has not essentially changed the nature of who I am." Does that make sense to you? So,
Absolutely.
okay, so do you mind if we start with just that? Tell me a little bit about your backstory and what happened.
Yeah, sure. So I was actually a project controls engineer for a large construction company. And I was at work one day and all of a sudden the computer screen went blank. And I thought my computer screen was broken.
Right.
And then I turned and looked at the wall and the black spot followed me. And I was like, oh, that's not good. Um, and long story short, what happened was I had a blood clot that went to my brain and actually cut off oxygen for the guess is 3 to 5 minutes. So I'm actually super, super lucky that I'm still here. And but during that time, I was left with a significant amount of brain damage. And so it was almost like somebody had just taken everything I had ever learned about math and vocabulary and just erased it like from a board. It was crazy. And so it took about 3 years to get better. I had slurred speech and was dragging my side and things like that. But the nice part was that I was only 36 when I had it, so I still had a young, healthy brain, and I still do have that permanent brain damage. But I've been able to compensate and learn how to take the stuff that I normally would have done myself and delegate it either to a piece of software or another person so that I'm able to live a relatively normal life.
Yeah. And, you know, I think what you're saying there is it's just what people do when you're faced with adversity. You have two options. You either look for the opportunities, or you look for the excuses. And you sound like one of those people who is not looking for excuses. You're looking for how do I get to where I want to be, regardless of what those limitations are, regardless of what it is that I face. So that's I mean, thank you for sharing that story. It's a it's an inspiration, but it's also a reminder that, listen, to me, everybody's got limitations, everybody's got issues, and it's how we handle those that determines how our life goes. It determines our success, our satisfaction, our quality of life, really.
And
So,
I mean, I'd love to tell you that I was always like sunshine and roses about it, and I wasn't.
no,
Yeah, it was rough for the first 2 years, and I finally had to. I had one of my physical therapists who basically had like a come to Jesus meeting with me and said, Michelle, if you don't stop wallowing,
yeah,
why are you here? And so she's like, you are so lucky that you live now versus 70 years ago when we don't have the technology that we have today. And she's like, buck up and let's do something with your life. And that was the kick in the pants that I needed.
sure. It's so interesting to hear you say that because a couple things. Number one, for me with spinal cord injury, really, if it had been 100 years ago, if it had been, it would have been fairly unlikely that I would have survived my injury at all. If it had been 70 years ago, I would have survived, but there were complications that they couldn't handle at that point, and my survival timeline would have been probably 2 to 3 years at tops. And now with the technology, the medicine, the advancements, all of that, I have the ability to live, what would be considered a normal lifespan, which is kind of an amazing thing. So the other piece is I I spent 6 months in therapy, so I know what you're talking about a little bit. And I just got in touch with my physical therapist from, 20, almost 28 years ago now, and talking to her and just reconnecting with her. It's really a kind of fun thing to look back and to see the people that were formative in helping me get where I am. Now, you and I could probably share stories about this stuff all day long, but that's kind of the qualification for why I was so intrigued to have you on the show. But the other piece is that you have insight, as you said, about delegation and about, getting some help to get your work done apart from you. So let's talk about that. How did you discover this? Is it something that you were aware of before you had your stroke, or is it something that kind of, as you were work processing after the stroke, this is something that you found?
Yeah, so I had kind of started delegating and outsourcing probably 10 or 15 years ago. Um, but I never did it well because I always felt like nobody could do the job as good as I could. Right. And so I'd give it to somebody and then I'd take it back and I'd be like, oh, that's not how I wanted it done. And what happened was with the stroke, it literally forced me to have to learn how to delegate and outsource correctly because I was either going to lose everything and um, or I was going to figure it out. And so I think that's why I call it, the stroke was actually a huge blessing in disguise because it forced me to like take my fingers and pry them loose from the tasks that, you know, only I could do. Yeah.
You hit it on the nose. So I had a guest on that enlightened me about this, and it's the concept that what happens to you is neither good nor bad. It is all in how you react to it and what your response is to it, which I think is a very valuable thing. So you were doing this, you weren't doing it well, and now you're saying, okay, um, I'm going to take these tasks, and I don't have a choice. Okay, but I'm also thinking that there's got to be a very, very real communication issue that comes with working with outsourcing, where you have to communicate. First of all, you have to find out what you're going to delegate. Then you have to find out who you're going to delegate it to, and then there has to be a conveyance of expectations, which is, I'm sorry, a really complicated way to say. I think that's called training, right?
Yeah.
So can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah. And you know, what's funny is everything that you said, I made way more difficult than it needed to be. When you break it down to its simplicity, um, it really doesn't have to be challenging. The biggest challenge is that we expect people to be mind readers. Even when we don't think we expect them to be mind readers, we think we're explaining it really well. And we're leaving out all these little micro decisions that we instantaneously make. And so, yes, the very first thing that I have people do is go through a time audit. And so what we do is we take a look at every single thing that you're doing for a week. And we're going to ask ourselves three very important questions. The first question is, if I stop doing this altogether, what happens? What is the consequence? And if it's not earth shattering and my business is going to fall apart, then the question becomes, does it make sense to keep doing this? Or should I just delete that task altogether? Because so many times we've taken on tasks and we just keep doing them because it's what we've always done. But we've never actually measured to see what happens if we stop, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so ironically, you will probably get rid of 20% of the things that you do just by asking that question.
Okay.
Then the second question that we ask is, is this something that I physically must do myself? Or, and this sounds like a horrible way to put this, but it kind of puts it in perspective. If you knew that you were going to be hit with a Mack truck tomorrow and you weren't going to be here and you wanted to pass off that information to somebody else, how would you download your brain so that that information could continue because you're no longer going to be here? And when you put your brain in that situation, it gets very creative. And so many times we're like, oh, yeah, no, we can't do that. But what we'll find is we can do part of it, right? We can outsource part of it, or we can outsource all of it. We just have to get a little creative. And I can give you some examples if you'd like.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, so let's say, for example, people are like, well, nobody can do my email but me. Okay, so here's a great solution that I had, where we were able to partially delegate the email. What happened was I had a coach who had his virtual assistant go through his email. And what she would do is she would record a very quick 5-minute Loom video that said, Rob needs the answer to this, Jack needs the answer to this, where do we go to find this? And she would literally go through the 30 emails that he had to respond to, and she would just ask the questions. He would then hit record, and he would answer, tell Rob this exactly, send this to Jack, schedule this for this, and send her that video. She would then go through, transcribe it all, and answer every single one of those emails. So what used to take him 2 or 3 hours a day takes him literally 5 minutes.
I love the idea that she is basically sorting through it all, condensing it all, and I would imagine that it's also very cost effective, because as the, whatever his position is, I'm assuming that his hourly rate is going to be significantly higher than her hourly rate. And
Yes.
so for her to take 2 or 3 hours to do this, and then to reduce it to a task that takes 5 or 10 minutes for him, it's such a cost savings measure.
Right. And you're absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head in that once we've taken all of our tasks, right, the next thing we need to do is ask ourselves, am I doing a task that I could pay somebody $20 an hour to do? And if I'm billing at, $250, $500, $1,000, who cares if it takes them 3 hours to do it when it only takes you 5 minutes? You've freed up your brain capacity. It's something you don't have to worry about. You can then go do your superpower, what you're really good at. And then so you paid $60 for that, as opposed to it took you 3 hours, billing at $500 an hour. That's what, $1,500, right?
Right. So let me just reiterate what I heard you say, and you make sure that I understood. As you're doing the time audit, you are looking at things that are marginal and can be let go, that these don't have a real impact on my business, or the impact is very slight. Then you're looking at things that are on the other end of the spectrum, that these are the things that I have to do and only I can do. And then you're looking at the things in the middle that say, okay, these are things that need to get done, and I could do them, or I could share them, even though it's good. It may take me a little bit of creativity to figure them out. Did I properly sum that up?
Yeah, and I probably didn't do the greatest of job explaining the hybrid in between. It's, all the admin tasks or bookkeeping tasks or research tasks or preparing for meetings, all that stuff that somebody else could do, you shouldn't be doing, right? Not only is it an hour, but it's brain capacity thing.
Okay.
Like the hourly rate, but also the brain capacity. And so what we want to do is, even though it'll feel very uncomfortable, because we're so used to, if we're not busy, then we're not working hard enough, we're not producing for the GDP, and so therefore we're lazy, right? And that's not necessarily right. We just need to work smarter versus harder. And so what we need to do is basically figure out what can we get off of our plate, and then how we get off our plate is super simple. People make it, really complicated, but what I have my clients do is I make them record a 5 to 10 minute video for every single task, because they're already currently doing the tasks, right? Before they get rid of it, they've got to do it. And so I just say, hey, grab Zoom, share your screen, and talk us through the process step by step while you're doing it. And then all those micro decisions that you're making, let us in on all that information, so that we know, okay, I didn't pick this picture because I don't like that color. And I didn't pick this one because I don't like the pose of his arms, or something, whatever, weird.
Right.
Right. And so then what we do is we actually take that video and we have our virtual assistant, not us, turn it into a standard operating procedure. And so what they'll do is they'll go through that video and take screenshots and literally create a point and click to duplicate that task exactly as you would have done it with all the nuances of your business. And that's where the real magic is. And anybody can create a graphic, but what we want to do is, we need to know your brand. We need to know what your business is about. What is your mission? What is your heart? And that's all the stuff that we need to download from your brain to get into the standard operating procedures. And that's where the magic really is. And that's how it becomes super simple to be able to hand off and create procedures without even realizing it.
I love it. It's kind of, you have to become self-aware and say, okay, let me actually record myself doing this. Let me share my thoughts as I'm doing it. Just from your personal experience, are there kind of low-lying fruit type activities that a lot of people can typically delegate, that are kind of standard, or are they divided up that, depending on what business you're in, it changes?
Yeah, there's typically some low hanging fruit out there that are really quick wins that'll get you a lot of your time back. And what we try to do is not just free up your time, but also have them do revenue generating activities. So, for example, you shouldn't be doing any type of like social media outreach. Please don't create your own graphics. Don't look up your own quotes. Have someone else do that for you. Any type of lead generation, right? If you're on LinkedIn or you're on Facebook or whatever that is, you should be outsourcing and delegating all of that until the conversation actually starts happening, and then you go in and build the relationship. But you shouldn't be going in and find the lead. Any type of calendar management, email management, keeping a database up to date, updating your CRM, any type of data entry into your bookkeeping, tracking invoices, tracking billing, who's paid, who hasn't paid. You really shouldn't be doing any of that stuff. That's stuff that you can outsource for $20, $30 an hour, and it's going to give you back a ton of your time. And we really don't want you in the business. We want you working on the business.
Okay. And is what you're talking about all based on a physical person to do this? Is there software that can help? How do you do that, and how do you kind of find the difference there?
Yeah, that's a great point. So once we go through our time audit and we have our list of the tasks that need to be done, but I don't necessarily have to do, then what I do is I ask people, is there a piece of software that can do this for me, or does a human have to do it? And so what I've found is there's usually a really good hybrid where I can get a piece of software to get it about 80% done, and then you need a human to come in and fine tune it. So for example, there's like for social media management, that is like a huge time suck, right?
Right.
And so there's programs out there like Hootsuite and Buffer, Social Bee, Meet Edgar. I don't care which one you use. They all do the exact same thing. And so what we can do is we can have our VA go in and schedule everything and put it in our little content buckets. And then what happens is the piece of software just automatically posts it. So the VA is doing the work on the front end, and then the software is running it on the back end.
Okay. And what I'm assuming happens there is that the VA instead of the VA having to do something every single day of the week, they're able to take one day, devote a couple of hours to it, and then it feeds itself for the rest of the week or the month or however that timeline set up. Is that what you're
Correct.
saying?
Yeah, and what I try to do with my assistants is I will try to time block those tasks for them. So we'll say, okay, the first Monday of the month is going to be social media day. And then, the very end of the month, that's going to be, invoice reconciliation or whatever. And so what we do is rather than them having to flip back and forth between, 18 different tasks every single day, can we batch it for them? Because what happens is they end up being way more effective. Then we put it in a piece of software, let the piece of software run, do its thing. And so we end up becoming efficient on both sides.
Okay. And yeah, so I think what you're saying is great, because you're saying they're on one task instead of being on one task for, let's just say, 20 minutes a day, for 5 days a week, which ends up being 100 minutes. By the time that you go in and you open the software and you do the thing, and then if you have them just do that for 1 hour, for 60 minutes one day, it's much more efficient, and it gets done in a much more timely manner. Okay. Some of the things that we're talking about, like social media management, is something that needs to be done over and over and over again on a repeated basis. Are there some things that are like just a one-time project that can also be done that way? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, when I'm talking about making videos and things like that, I'm talking about repetitive tasks that are going to happen all the time. But let's say you have a one-off task, like let's say your company needs to build a software app. It would not make sense for you to create a whole video when you're only going to do it once, right?
Okay.
So for our one-off tasks, we definitely don't want to hire like a forever virtual assistant for that. We want to, typically go to, oh geez, if it's video editing, I go to like Fiverr or something. But if it's like a software, I'm probably going to go to, oh my gosh, I can't think of the word right now.
Is like
Upwork,
Upwork.
probably,
Okay.
or yeah, freelance, something like that.
Yep.
And the way that I do that is, let's say it's something that I have no idea how to do. I'll typically test them, and I use a piece of software called testgorilla.com. It's amazing. Okay. So you can pay $7 per test, and you can go into Upwork and you can say, hey, here's the proposal. In order to get this job, I need you to take this test. And so then if their skills are actually really on par before you award them the project. And then it's only, that one time, and it's a one and done.
Okay. I love it. I was not aware. I'm aware of Upwork and Fiverr and that, but I wasn't aware that you could actually test people on their skills. Now, how does that test work? Is it something that you say, I want them to do a project using this type of interface, or how does the testing work?
Yeah, so it's going to test their general knowledge. So if you had something specific that you wanted them to do, and you knew, let's say you are a coder and you know how to code, and you're like, I want you to go in and duplicate this, and I don't know, I'm not a coder, so I can't tell you, but you could create a one-off project and have them just do that little tiny piece to see if they know what they're doing. Or you could use, I use Test Gorilla for testing things that I don't know how to do. So, for example, when we hire a virtual assistant, we have a crazy vetting system. We make them go through 6 different phases before they're able to be hired. And so I will actually use very similar, almost the exact same vetting system when I'm hiring somebody on Upwork too. It's just, it's a smaller hybrid version. Yeah.
Right.
If that makes any sense.
It does make a lot of sense. All right. I'm imagining that people out there are saying like, okay, you've got me intrigued. I'm thinking maybe I've thought of a couple tasks that I may be able to delegate. You've given me some suggestions for things that I may be able to do and ways that I may be able to do it, but I've got no idea where to find these people. Can you help out and say, all right, this is where I might be able to find a VA to hire?
Yeah, great question. So if you're looking for admin or call center type work, the Philippines is a great place to look. I specifically use onlinejobs.ph. That's the job board that I use. There's nothing magical about that. It's the same thing as Career Builder, Indeed, Monster. You're going to get good stuff. You're going to get crap. You're going to have to weed through it to find the diamonds in the rough. If you're looking for computer programming, right? I typically don't go to the Philippines for that. I'm going to go to I want to use the word Russia. I know it's like 100 different little countries now, but so
the former
Eastern Europe,
USSR.
Exactly. The former USSR, and also India.
Okay.
Those are great places for like coding. Now, if you wanted a website built, you could still go to the Philippines for that. If you need a Spanish speaking virtual assistant, I would definitely take a look at Mexico. Um, and you can find, all of those on like Upwork or something like that, and you can filter by their region. It's just usually each area of the world kind of has their specialty in how they outsource. Since our agency is we concentrate primarily on lead generation and admin type tasks. I do 100% of my hiring out of the Philippines, and it just works great because of the culture, and who they are as people. I love it.
Okay. Now, you had mentioned a pay rate of like $20 to $30 an hour. Is that what you're paying in the Philippines, or is it a little bit less than that, or how does that work?
Yeah, great question. So the US dollar to Filipino peso conversion rate is very favorable in the United States. The thing that drives me nuts is when people are like, oh, I can go hire somebody for $2 an hour. That is not a livable wage for them. And so what we did was with our company, we took everything that we hated about outsourcing and we flipped it on its head.
Okay.
And so we said, all right, let's pay them the equivalent to about $50,000 a year in the United States. Let's give them a pension. Let's give them health benefits. Let's give them, paid time off and all that stuff. So we've actually structured a whole benefits package for them where you could have somebody working full time for you, give them all of those benefits, and it costs you about $900 a month in US dollars. Which is incredibly affordable for us, but also gives them a very, very livable wage. So that's legitimately like paying $50,000 for an admin here in the United States. It's the same conversion.
I, and I love it that you're being, I mean, socially conscious and paying a livable wage, which is just because they live outside the United States doesn't mean that they are cheap labor. And I, I'm assuming then when you're paying pennies on the dollar, sometimes there's an expectation of lower quality work. But when it's a livable wage and you're paying somebody well, that you're getting you're more likely to get a higher product out of it. Is that
Absolutely. So some of my virtual assistants are more educated than I am, and I have my MBA. So some of them have PhDs, a lot of them have MBAs. They at least have a bachelor's. So we're not talking about somebody who, they speak English very well. They write English very well. We're talking about the cream of the crop
okay?
of what we're looking for. And the cool part is that if we're able to pay $6 an hour for the admin work, now we can afford to pay $50 to $75 an hour for skilled work in the United States and hire people in the United States for that skilled work.
I, Fantastic. I love it. Listen, you have been wonderful. If people want to learn more about you, more about your business, where can they find you?
Yeah, it's real easy. If you just want to go to awesomeoutsourcing.co. We own the .com too, but and or you can just shoot me an email. It's Michelle with two L's, Michelle at awesomeoutsourcing.com. On there, you'll find a cool little task discovery, which is that kind of time audit I was talking to you about. And there's a couple videos that'll kind of walk you through how to how to decipher everything. We'll even actually hop on a phone call with you and help you create like an action plan of, okay, here's what we got to delegate first for you.
I love it. Thank you so much, Michelle. This has been very interesting, and I think it's a way that we can all, especially solopreneurs, all increase our productivity. And as you said, it's not just a money suck. It actually is. You're able to get people involved in revenue generating activities. It's wonderful. I thank you. It is now time for 3 questions to establish your humanity. Are you ready for these, my friend?
I am ready. Hit me.
What was the last movie that you watched,
Passengers.
and what did you think?
I loved it. I watch that movie all the time. How cool would it be to be like in space, right? Stuck on a ship and you just have Arthur to feed you drinks all day long. It's great.
Nice. What is your proudest accomplishment?
I think the fact that we brought a socially acceptable way to outsource to the world.
And rightly so, that is a great accomplishment. All right, last question. What are your top three side dishes for a summer barbecue? So, if you're doing a cookout in the backyard, what are, and you can either give them to me in order or you can give them to me in random order. These are the three essentials that you have to have when you're cooking out in the backyard.
Oh yeah. So I don't like mayonnaise, so mine are going to be weird.
It's okay.
So you got to have baked beans, absolutely, and you got to make your own baked beans with like the hamburger in it and all that good fun stuff. Yeah. Then second, you got to have like good homemade salsa and chips. It's just and third, if you're at a barbecue, you got to have a good watermelon, man.
Excellent. All right. So I am right with you on this. I'm not a mayonnaise person, so we are kindred spirit on this. Here's the question, though, and that is, do you salt your watermelon or no salt on the watermelon?
Oh my gosh, I know that's such a hard camp. I don't salt my watermelon,
Okay.
but I know a lot of people that do, and they say it's really good. I just have never tried it.
So I have family that lives in the southeast United States, and they are all huge salt on your watermelon proponents, and they say it makes it juicier and all kinds of stuff. And I'm just like, it may make it juicier, but it's still, there's a taste there that I'm not really. It wasn't what I was expecting, and yeah, so
Yeah.
completely agreed. Michelle Thompson, thank you so much for being with me today. I appreciate you sharing. It's been very insightful. You are indeed smart, and you have established that you are indeed a person. For all my listeners, thank you for being here today. I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I have, and I will remind you that when you stop learning, you stop living. Have a great day, everybody.